Hello, BookTube. Today I want to revisit my reprise of the alphabet tags created by Jim of Jim's Books, Reading and Stuff. Today, the F tag. F is for France. Who is your favorite French author? I'm not well versed in French literature. The only French author whose works I've read in a fairly large amount is Arthur Rimbaud. So by default, it's Rimbaud. I would like to read a bit more in French literature. I just need to figure out how to go about doing that. And perhaps I will report back on that in a future video. F is for fiction. Approximately what percentage of your reading is fiction? Over the last few years, I've had increasing problems reading fiction. And fiction, if we define fiction as a made up story told strictly in words, then over time, the percentage has been decreasing markedly. This year, out of the 356 or 57 books that I have read, only two that I can recall have been fiction that I finished. There might be a bit more, but I don't recall them off the top of my head. The number of novels that I have bailed on, or fiction that I've bailed on this year, as most years lately are much more prevalent there. I'm not entirely sure why I'm not as in love with, or as interested, or as engaged with fiction in a strictly prose format. But that's how my reading has turned out. Now, if we consider graphic literature, then the numbers are very different. I have, over the last few years, begun to read a large amount of manga, Japanese comic books. And if we define fiction as a made up story without any sort of structural or form requirements, then, well, all of the manga I've been reading have been fiction. And so that would up the fiction count significantly to probably 90 plus percent. Because I've read a lot of manga. The vast majority of my reading this year, as last year, and perhaps the year before, have been manga. F is for fantasy. Who is your favorite fantasy author? Again, this question will be contingent on whether or not how I want to incorporate manga to this answer. All of the manga that I have been reading have been fantasy. Well, I mean, fantasy has been my favorite genre, is my favorite genre. Science fiction is my second favorite. Whether it's fiction, film, television, comics, creatively, fantasy is my life, really. If we're going to talk about fantasy in a strictly prose format, that relationship, as it has with prose fiction in general, has decreased markedly over the last few years, to where I'm having, when I try a work of fantasy, I'm increasingly less into it, whether it's a more recent book or an older work. I'm struggling. I don't know why. It's bugging me. So I don't know if I necessarily have an answer, particularly as my engagement with strictly prose fantasy has plummeted markedly. I do not recall who my answer was the last time I did this tag. Um, and also that while I might love some authors' works, I'm not necessarily all that fond of others. For an example, I thought I got rid of those two. Okay. Um, let's see here. Looking at Brian Kemp's work. So I loved his novel, The City of Lost Fortunes. I'm not as fond of his follow up, Gather the Fortunes. The same is true of Nicholas Eames, whose two novels I really enjoyed, Kings of the Wild, and I am not as fond of um, the Bloody Rose, the sequel. So my enjoyment of an author's work is not terribly consistent. So when it comes to prose, I don't think I really have a favorite anymore, um, which is annoying and frustrating. One of my uh, recurrent frustrations over the last few years I haven't, is that for whatever reason, I've fallen out of love with prose fantasy. Now, if we add in manga to the mix, that's a whole nother story and is quite the competition. But I would say probably Hiro Mishima, whose works include Wraith Master, which I wish I had. Um, I need to really look and see if I can start picking up Wraith Master. Though that will be a pain in the rear end because that series came out early in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I think I don't know if there's any current publishing of it. Fairy Tale, my favorite manga series, or one of them, and Eden Zero. He's also worked on and is currently working on a number of other series as well. And Clamp, who are a collective of Japanese manga artists whose work include Cardcaptor Sakura, um, X 1999, Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicle, um, Exholic, and a whole bunch of other series. Um, Many of which I have not gotten around to yet, and I would like to. Just need to get around to doing that. So I'd probably give them also Masashi Kishimoto, even though he's really like Naruto and a whole bunch of others. I could go on and on about my favorite mangaka or manga artists. So anyway, let's move on to F is for 5 stars. How many books have been 5-star reads for you this year? Uh, well, much like last year, this has definitely been a year where the manga has taken over. I've just been, the manga have been just amazing. Outside of that, um, I'm focusing on new reads. I don't know really if there are any books that I would give 5 stars to, except for. No, nothing's actually coming to mind. Um, so, yeah. F is for funny. Funny has two meanings. What book did you find both funny peculiar and funny haha? I don't think I've actually had any this year. F is for Fight Club and film adaptation. What book and film adaptation both merited 5 stars in your opinion? Mm, Again, I don't think I have an answer. I haven't really watched much film in quite a while, which is disappointing. Um, so let's move on to F is for flower. What is the last book you read with the name of a flower in the title? Oh, I don't think I have one. Like, there was absolutely nothing coming to me. Um, F is for flash fiction. What are your thoughts or experiences of this medium? So, I've read a few flash fiction stories, I think about over 10 years ago, and they don't really work. I'm not a huge fan of flash fiction. So that was the F tag. If you would like to do this tag, consider yourselves tagged. And I will be back with another tag here in a bit. So until then, thank you, BookTube. Have a great afternoon and stay safe.